Hi, welcome to Canada's Social Changemakers. My name is Justin Douglas, and today I'm here with Annamie Paul. Annamie is a leadership candidate for the Federal Green Party of Canada. She's also a lawyer, a mother, and a human rights advocate. So thank you, Annamie. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
It's Canada Day today, so let me wish you a happy Canada Day.
It's not Canada Day, it's Malachi Daniel Freeman Day.
It's also your son's birthday, so happy
That's
birthday
right.
to your beautiful son.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I just want to do a quick acknowledgement that we are also part of a colonial legacy here in Canada. So I'd like to recognize the Indigenous territory that I'm sitting on today, which is part of the Wasanich peoples, as well as the Esquimalt Songhees. And I think in Toronto, I did a quick look up. There's a lot of different Indigenous folks who have been part of Toronto Centre's historical grounds, but the Mississauga, Chipewyan, and Anishinaabe. So,
And the Haudenosaunee.
Haudenosaunee.
And the Huron-Wendat.
Amazing. Thank you for including them as well. Good. So for people who might not know you, you are a very interesting and talented individual, but tell us a little bit about your professional background and what sort of led you on this road into politics.
Certainly. Well, I'm a lawyer by training, as you said. I did my degree at the University of Ottawa, particularly because it had a wonderful Indigenous faculty. We had a number of Indigenous peoples on our faculty, and our education, particularly in the first year, was done through an Indigenous lens. And so that was life-changing for me to have that experience. And then I also have a master's degree in public affairs from Princeton University. Both of those degrees are really intended to give me the skills, the tools that I thought that I would need to really affect positive change. And so I have had a very varied career, all really around that idea of positive social change. I founded an institute focused on increasing the representation of marginalized groups in Canadian politics. I've also worked internationally as a diplomat. I worked in the International Criminal Court and Canada's mission to the EU. And I founded another organization just before leaving Barcelona, an innovation hub working to serve as a catalyst for international organizations working on the most difficult global challenges. So yes, wow. It's been quite a ride.
That is a beautiful professional CV, but you're also a mother of two beautiful children. And tell us a little bit, maybe something about you personally that to get to know you a little bit better.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, today is Malachi Daniel Freeman Day. He is my oldest. He turned 20 today. I actually had him while I was in graduate school down in the States. And so there are all these fun photos I've been looking up over the last couple of days of me breastfeeding him in class. And there's this iconic one of Bill Clinton, the president. He was the president of the United States at the time, holding him up. And another one of me in my robes on graduation day, breastfeeding him, just as I was about to go in to get my degree. And I have another son who is 16 years old. I've been with my partner for, well, next year will be 25 years we've been married. And he's an international, yes, thank you. You know, that's my greatest accomplishment, I think, them and the kids. And he's an international human rights lawyer. His focus is on peace negotiations and also on amnesties. He's just all over the world all of the time. He's actually the one, you know, when people talk about what's your partner doing? I can actually say he's out there, you know, saving lives. So it's, we're from Toronto. We're very lucky to have a very nice and close extended family on both sides. You know, those are some of the things that I keep in mind during the long, hard days of campaigning.
So speaking of campaigning, how did you decide to get involved with the Green Party and what led you into the leadership race?
Well, you know, these things are a journey. When I came back to Canada, I knew I wanted to join a party. I looked at all of the parties again, and I think with fresh eyes, I'd been away for a while, and it was really clear to me that the Green Party was the party for me. First, because of the climate emergency. You know, this is an existential crisis. I'm a policy analyst, and so I know that I understand the science behind that claim, and I needed to be part of a party that I thought had real solutions related to that. I also wanted to be part of a party that really believed in, that had a strong set of core values around things like nonviolence, participatory democracy, equity, you know, sustainability. And the Green Party has the most socially progressive platform. And I only want to be part of moving us in one direction, which is forward and towards a more just and equitable society. So it was a really easy match for me.
Speaks to my heart. Absolutely.
Yes. And why did I decide to run now? Really because, you know, all of these issues are just, they're urgent. You know, we had urgent issues that we were dealing with before the pandemic, and everything has become even more urgent now. And I think this is a time for people who have some fresh ideas, but ideas that are really grounded in science, in evidence, people who are going to bring diverse perspectives to the table. We have a real deficit of diversity in our upper levels of politics. And, you know, I just think the time for standing on the sidelines is over. Any of us who have skills and talents like you just did, you know, we have to be out there, you know, using our voice, using our talents to make as much positive change as we can.
I agree. I 1000% echo that. I feel like it's time to have a little bit more diversity in terms of representation. I identify as a member of the LGBT community. So for me, it's important to see that diversity. But we'll talk about that again a little bit more. I'd like to have a big conversation about diversity actually, but just to start still in the warming up of the sort of what we'll call them softball questions.
Okay. Or we're going to hardball later.
We'll see. Friendly hardball, friendly hardball.
Okay.
But so there's 10 leadership candidates running.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, were you surprised by Elizabeth May's decision not to run again? And let's start there.
No, yes. Well, no, I wasn't surprised that she wasn't going to run in the next election as the leader of the party. She made it very clear that this was going to be her last election as the leader of the party. I was surprised about her decision to step down exactly when she did. It was a bit earlier, but I think she, you know, she just decided that the time was right. And so, yes, I mean, this is, she's been the leader and the face of the party and really the soul of the party for going on 14 years now. And that this is a huge transition for all of us.
She's probably been one of the most effective female leaders too, I think, in terms of Canadian politics. I did a little research and I think there's only been 13 elected premiers, territorial leaders, or prime ministers. And of those 13 women, none of them have been able to be reelected. And so I know that Elizabeth May was not the leader of the province, the country, but she has done a phenomenal job in bringing the Green Party to the forefront. So I just want to recognize that, Elizabeth, and say thank you for the work that you've done.
Yeah.
Now that there's a new brass of people, new candidates, I watched the all candidates debate with Steve and on TVO.
Yeah.
And for me, I had a little bit of a hard time understanding the policy differences between all of the 10 leadership candidates. So for example, when he was like, who's against pipelines? Everyone put up their hand. And so maybe could you just sort of distinguish yourself a little bit in terms of policy from some of the other candidates? Well,
sure. You know, I think one of the reasons that you struggled maybe a little, Justin, is that we have a set of core values. You know, we're part of actually a global movement of Green parties, and we share 6 core values. And so I'm hoping that there is more that we have in common than the things that separate us. But we do have significant differences on some policy areas, and I encourage you and our members to get to know more about all of us. In my case, some of the things that I think that I offer, particularly at this moment, and I think you match a leader to the moment in time. One is the global experience. I have by far the longest global experience. I worked, as I said, in the Canadian mission to the EU and in the International Criminal Court, and also on the NGO side as well for conflict prevention NGOs. And I think in a time of global challenges, understanding how we need to cooperate with other actors internationally is very important. Being a person who has created from scratch the first institute in Canada focused on getting more diversity at the table, in the room where the decisions are being made, I think is very important at this moment, because people are demanding that change. They're seeing the systemic racism that we have in our system, the underrepresentation. And within our party as well, we are really not diverse. It is our biggest flaw as a party. So that's a big, that makes a big difference as well. And so I think when you look at that combination, I believe that I'm really well suited for this moment in time within our party, but also within the life of Canada as well.
It reminds me a little bit of RuPaul's Drag Race. I don't know if you've ever seen the show.
I have. You know what it is? I really feel honestly that if I enter, I'm going to just tumble down that rabbit hole.
It is a rabbit hole.
I'm going to turn on the first episode, and 5 days later, I'm going to wake up.
Merge.
Exactly. Just think, what happened there? So that's one of those things that I'm going to, the day that I win, and I definitely am planning to win, I'm going to have a 12-hour sleep, and then I'm going to put that on, and I'm just going to let it take me where it takes me.
Okay. So the reason I bring it up is season 7, there is a plus size queen named Ginger Minj. And RuPaul, she makes it to the finale. Sorry, spoiler alert. But RuPaul says to her, there's never been a plus size queen. Is it time to have a plus size queen winner? And Ginger Minj looks to RuPaul and says, yes, it's time to have a plus size queen. But I don't want to win because I'm a plus size queen. I want to win because I'm the best person to win this race. And so I pose that question a bit to you. Is it time to have a female woman of color lead a political party in Canada? And why are you the best candidate for the job?
And that's a great contextualization, because absolutely, I embrace the fact that I'm a Black woman, I'm a Jewish woman. Those would both be firsts. Being a woman of color, that would also be a first. And frankly, Justin, I think that it is more than a little sad that I would represent so many firsts, considering this is 2020. And maybe that's part of the answer. We need to have different voices at the table, not just symbolically, but also because we know that it produces better public policy, and there's lots of research that confirms that. And in my case, I am all of those things, but I'm really so much more. I am bilingual. I care about positive change. I really believe that I belong to a party that is offering tremendously effective policy solutions at this moment. And I do believe that that being there in that role is something that is going to just inspire many people who just don't see themselves reflected in the political process. But it's not just those things. Those are part of my identity, but the other part of my identity is my education, my experience, all of the things that have prepared me to be a very strong leader at this point.
Beautiful. I agree. I have a strong desire to see more diversity in Canadian politics. I also went to law school. I've also been involved in a lot of NGOs. I immigrated. I did my articling in immigration and refugee law in Toronto. Yeah, it's important to me to have a little bit more diversity. For the LGBT community, I can only think of Sven Robinson, who was sort of the out and proud gay politician back in the day. Scott Bryson, when he left the Conservative Party, finally came out when he joined the Liberals, but he was in the closet for a long time. And I haven't really seen myself reflected in terms of Canadian politics. And I can only imagine that there's a lot of other people who want to see themselves reflected also, while still having policies that are progressive and helpful and raise all of us up to the highest standard possible.
Absolutely.
Okay, so in terms of, you're the Green Party of Canada, that implies that there is a connection to the climate crisis, a connection to environmentalism. What would be your vision in terms of the Greens and the environmental policy?
We, in the Green Party put forward the most ambitious climate policy in the last election, bar none. Bar none. We are the only party that is proposing a plan that is sufficient to the science. And that's really important to say. This is one of these things where you just do it all the way, or you might as well not bother. You can't do it partially. You have to do it 100%. And so where I come in, because as the leader of our party, one of the differences is you are there to represent the policies of the members. We're very, very grassroots. And so I don't develop the policy myself, but I help to facilitate it. I share my own voice. And during the campaign, what we're doing is we're trying to move knowledge forward. We're trying to put ideas out there amongst the members so that we can talk about them. We always want to be right at the cutting edge in terms of climate policy in this country. There are many exciting things happening around carbon pricing globally, and we need to make sure that we're talking about that. And we also need to be talking about how we're going to invest these hundreds of billions of dollars that we're going to be spending in the next couple of years to make sure that we get as quickly as possible towards a green economy and a sustainable green economy where we're hitting our climate reduction targets, so our carbon reduction targets. So it's for anyone who is who believes that we need to be meeting those targets and wants to be a part of it. I can't think of a more exciting place to be right now than with our party. It's this is a time of maybe permanent transformational change for the country.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think it also speaks to our electoral system and the connection between how people vote and what they get back in terms of their politicians. Yep. And we've seen that the Green Party has at least about 10% of national support across from this very large, at least, depending, in general. Yes, ups and downs depending on the riding and different things.
Yeah.
Here in Vancouver Island, where I'm coming from, there's a
powerhouse.
Yes, we were the first to in Sandwich Gulf Islands. We were the first ones to elect Elizabeth May. We have Nanaimo now with the Green candidate. David Murner is from the riding next door. He was very close to winning. Victoria, it was a race between the NDP and the Green Party. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the way that the system is set up right now with the sort of first past the post, the winner takes all sort of system, there's the argument that progressives are now being divided, whereas the right wing has done a very good job of amalgamating their base and moving everything to the right, and the liberals are very good at just sort of swallowing up the center. Justin Trudeau in the last election promised that we would see electoral reform, and then quite clearly broke that promise. What are your thoughts on electoral reform, the system that we have now, and how to really include a multitude of voices?
Another great question. First, I will just encourage people to visit our website, annamiepaul.ca. I put out an action plan on democratic renewal just about a week ago. Well, maybe a little bit longer, less than 2 weeks ago, very recently. Because you're right, Justin, we have a real problem in terms of a democratic deficit. There's a mismatch between the way people are voting and their preferences and what we see reflected in our provincial and also our federal legislatures. And so this is something that I think that, certainly the Greens are very committed to. One of our core values is participatory democracy. In my plan, I talk about a citizens' assembly for democratic renewal, particularly, not just to discuss proportional representation, but also other issues that are tied to potentially to democratic renewal, like the voting age and mandatory voting, perhaps, a whole suite, and putting that to an assembly and letting those representatives consider it, with the idea that it would then be brought to our parliament, who would either adopt them or put them to the people. I think that there's an appetite for that now. We want to see more collaboration and cooperation between the levels of government. We've seen what a difference it's made during the pandemic, and people just are not interested in going back. The challenges are too urgent for the kind of party politics that you get out of this first past the post system. So, I'm very supportive of electoral reform, and I think that the plan that we're proposing is actionable and gets us there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I really hope so. And I think that also ties into how different political parties can work with each other, because we've seen sort of in the context of minority governments, the NDP have been very strong in putting forward policies like the CERB and potentially universal basic income, which is also a Green Party. I'm going to just jump in there.
Correct me. And You know, I'm welcome and I congratulate the NDP for becoming champions of a basic income. We call it guaranteed livable income. You know, but we have been talking about that for many, many years. And during the last election, we raised it. We encouraged the other parties to join us in calling for that, and they didn't. And so, you know, the Greens always want to work collaboratively. We're very happy when the other parties adopt, you know, our policies. I do think, though, in terms of the next election, it's important for Canadians to remember who originated, who championed those policies, who did the hard policy work in the first place, and, you know, to choose the real McCoy.
Nice, very nice. Also, what you mentioned before about engaging young people, maybe reducing the voting age, maybe having a mandatory voting policy. I do think change originates with young voters. And so how do we engage first-time voters, younger voters into a system where oftentimes they feel alienated or disconnected from? What are your thoughts around youth engagement?
Well, you know, the first thing that I want to emphasize is that youth are engaged. You know, there is a misperception that youth are not, particularly when people look at the voter turnout amongst that demographic. It's true that young people, I think there's about a 10% gap between the general voter turnout and youth voter turnout. But then let's look beyond voting. You know, look at the climate movement that's being led by young people. Look at the protests recently and the demands for change related to anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism and systemic racism. These are movements being led by young people. So young people are ready to lead. They are very engaged. If they're not engaging with our voting system, it's because they also can smell hypocrisy. Who wants to vote in a system where your vote doesn't get reflected in the people that end up in parliament? You know, you only need about a third of the votes in this country in order to secure a majority, depending on how those votes are distributed. And, you know, young people are far less tolerant for those kind of, you know, that kind of mismatch. So I think by making our system more equitable, by making sure that there's more diversity within our system, I think that young people will you know, flood into that, I would say, last frontier of engagement, because they're involved everywhere else, and they're very involved in our campaign. They're leading our campaign.
That's amazing, and I hope so, because I really am sort of disillusioned by the powers that be, and it feels like there is this group, let's call them the old guard, that are trying to maintain the status quo and suck oil for everything it's worth. And then there's this new energy, the new guard. And I really feel like you help represent the ushering in of a new wave of politics. And so I really hope that you and other people who have shared similar visions can start to become to the front of this new system and really change things from the inside. Yeah. Okay, so now we're gonna go, yeah, fingers crossed. And I wanna be part of that as well. You know, I really do feel like I was saying to you before we started the interview, for me, it feels like it's time to really re-engage. And I've taken my whole education has been in politics and law, working with NGOs, and been on the front line of the protests. And I just felt really burnt out. I really was hitting my head against the wall, and I had to take a step back for a while and be like, how do I live in this world without feeling exhausted all the time? And so now I feel like it's the right time to reemerge and to really use my voice for as much proactive discussion as possible. So
welcome back, and this is the time. If there was ever a time for people to just dig deep and find that final font of energy, this is really the moment. We're going to be making decisions in the next couple of years that we're all going to have to live with for at least a generation. And so this is absolutely the moment for all of the people who want to see that change, to really just find a way to be a part of it. And hopefully, you know, this leadership race and my candidacy will inspire some of those people to get involved. It's a very easy way to get involved, you know. Sign up to vote.
For me. Yeah, we're going to talk about that for sure too. But now let's talk about some of this would be like the hardball question, I guess. But it's a difficult discussion to have, but I think it's an important one. And that is in terms of the Defund the Police movement and racism in Canada. And maybe you could talk a little bit about your own personal experience, and then more broadly and in general, some of the experiences of Black Canadians, Indigenous Canadians. I'd also like to include LGBT, especially trans women of color into that conversation, and as well as differently abled bodies who also faced a lot of discrimination, and how we elevate and bring everyone to the table.
Well, you know, this moment is such an extraordinary one, and it's one that I hope the momentum continues on to get the change that has been so desperately needed for such a long time. You know, as I said, I'm a mother of two Black boys. My younger son was born in the United States, so he's also an African American. I have African American cousins. And you know, and I lived in the States for a while, and I can tell you that the sense of mortal danger is real. You know, it is something that you feel the moment you step out of your door, and you can't even feel comfortable in your house. And Canadians have thought for a long time that we were different, that we were special, that you know, we had nothing in common with those experiences, and it's just simply not true. We spent a lot of time over the last number of weeks in our campaign just putting out the facts about, you know, Black Torontonians are 20 times more likely to be shot by the police. The 75% of Indigenous peoples the Indigenous peoples who make up 75% of the prisoners in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. The 3 Indigenous peoples who were killed just in the last month on wellness checks. You know, these were police officers that were supposed to be going to make sure they were okay, and they killed them. And so I can't overstress how much change is needed in the system. This is intolerable, and when you're talking about criminal justice, you know, it's something that has to be dealt with on an urgent basis. And so we're going to be putting out a policy statement within the next few days about this. I'm going to give you some of the highlights. You know, you heard it here first. You know, breaking news. So I support absolutely a reduction and a redirection of funds away from the police and towards the services that are currently underfunded. In Toronto, the biggest, by far, the largest part of the municipal budget goes to policing. It's over $1 billion. And so that money should be going to services that have been chronically underfunded, mental health services, particularly mental health services, education, social services, even basic things like transportation. I mean, there are many linkages. And the police should be restricted to only the things that security forces were originally intended to do. They should not be social service workers. And so that is the main thing that we want to see: a reduction of funds and a redirection of them towards those social services. And then, of course, the deep work of reconstructing those organizations so that the systemic racism is rooted out. I would encourage you and all of your viewers to take a look at the United Nations report from 2017. They did a fantastic job of recommending a series of measures that could root out systemic racism from our criminal justice system.
Sign me up. That was one of my biggest frustrations, I think, working in immigration and refugee law and encountering some of the systemic racism that existed within there. And also being a resident of British Columbia, we have the Highway of Tears, missing and murdered Indigenous women, the violence that is suffered from women of color, specifically trans women of color, the threat of death for trying to live your true experience. And it seems that with Trump and there's this embrazened ability to now be a vocal racist, that somehow all of a sudden your hate is somehow acceptable within our society, and people feel much more emboldened than ever before to show that. But on the other hand, I also do feel like people have shown their compassion much more, and our support for each other. And it's again that sort of hate versus love, fear versus progression that is going on in our society, and we have to be champions of love, right? That's the only way that we're going to get through
100%.
this.
There is no other way. You're absolutely right. And you know, the riding that I ran in the 2019 election in Toronto, it's the smallest riding in Canada, and it's also home to the largest LGBTQ 2
plus.
in the country, you know. And so many of the members of our campaign team come from that community. They're leaders, you know. They're not just leading our campaign, but they've run as candidates. They're ready to lead. We don't have to ask anymore. We don't have to ask communities, what can we do for you, so that we, you know, and then send it to others to do. There are so many leaders within communities that have historically suffered from injustice that we can just give the baton. You know, if you want better policing for Black people and Indigenous peoples in this country, give them, not give, but move aside so that they can take those roles. If you want better policies for trans people in this country, well then let trans people create and implement those policies. You don't need to do it on their behalf. And so we talk about that, and we try to highlight all of those leaders within our campaign. And you know, you're in Vancouver, and I'll say that it's very urgent there. You know, in terms of police checks, 15% of the police checks in Vancouver are done on Indigenous peoples, who are only about 4% of the population, and less than 1% of the population is Black in Vancouver, yet 4%, between 4 and 5% of the checks are done. So there's about you're 4 to 5 times more likely than a white person to be stopped by the police in Vancouver if you're either Indigenous or a Black person. Again, it's just intolerable. So
it blows my mind. I can't believe that those are still statistics in Canada today.
Yeah.
It's very disheartening, but I really hope that with these conversations, we can start to see that change.
Absolutely.
And yeah, well, let's just switch it a little bit. COVID-19, what has the pandemic taught us, and what do we still need to learn?
You know, some of the lessons are very personal. My father passed away about a month ago, not from the virus, but because of the absolutely scandalous lack of care in our long-term care for our seniors.
I'm so sorry,
you know,
I can't even imagine.
It is, you know, we had no idea, you know. When I say we, I mean people in Canada, not our government, because they knew, but people in Canada just didn't realize the scale of the neglect. You know, 82% of the deaths in Canada have been within long-term care facilities, 82% of the COVID deaths. And you're about 4 times more likely, I think it goes up to 5 times, depending on the province, to die in for-profit long-term care from COVID than in public long-term care. And so I think what we're seeing, what the pandemic has done, is that it has touched many people. It has revealed to many people in Canada all of the failings, all of the gaps that still exist in our social safety net, that there are still many people that don't have the opportunity to live in dignity, people who are just moments away or a day away from losing everything. You know, out in Vancouver, we know that the deaths from opioid poisonings, we don't call them overdoses, I mean, they're really poisonings, have spiked tremendously because there is no safe supply. And so I think that we're going to emerge from this period really asking ourselves, what do we value? How much do we care about our neighbors? And what kind of country do we want to see as we move toward recovery? And I believe that Canadians, and as I understand it, the polls are saying Canadians want change. They don't want to go back to the way things were, and they want to see a safer society for everyone.
Yeah, I agree with that. And thank you for mentioning the opioid crisis here. It's something that touches all of us. I don't think there's anyone in British Columbia who doesn't know somebody who has passed away, who has been put into a hospital due to, as you put it, a poisoning. And yeah. I appreciate that language. I also think that it's been enlightening in terms of highlighting who is really important in our society: grocery workers, nurses, migrant farm workers, And I think it's broken a little bit this celebrity worship culture that we have, looking to movie stars to dictate what are our values in society, and billionaires who really don't care about the average person. And so I think it's really highlighted a lot of the inequities and is an opportunity for us to really change the way that the system is run. That capitalism, with this me first hierarchy, people at the bottom don't matter, isn't working anymore. And it's not to just say, we'll destroy the system, let's go to communism, but there are other alternatives. And it's time to bring some of these new ideas, which I think the Green Party is proponing, or a proponent of many of these new ideas, into the forefront of the conversation. And yeah, I really appreciate that. Okay, so for people who want to learn more about you, where can they learn more about you? How can they get involved in your campaign in the Green Party?
Great question. And I'm so happy you asked, because, you know, sometimes I just have to force that information in there. You know, so, you know, this is, I'm involved in a leadership race, Justin, and everything now is really focused on getting people to join up, sign up, so that they can vote. You know, leadership races are different. People join to vote specifically for a candidate. You know, it's something that it takes less than 2 minutes. It's all online. It's just your name and your information, and that's about it. If people want to see leadership like mine, then really the thing to do is to show up and to sign up and to vote. And they can do that by going to our website to register. And our website is annamepaul.ca, and I see my name is there. But it's ANNAMIEPAUL.ca. We also would love to have volunteers. We're trying to reach every single member. We're trying to recruit many more new members. And so if you feel motivated to do that, you're very, very welcome. And there is always a place for you in our campaign. But more than anything else, spread the word, tell your friends, sign up to vote. Let's make some history. Let's make some history, and let's make some change together.
Last question, where, when, and where? When is the voting taking place? How do you become a member?
Perfect. So in order to become a member, you visit our website, you click on the join button, it will take you directly to the site. And again, it takes, for a fast typer, it takes less than a minute to sign up. And then you will be able to vote for me between September 26th and October 4th. You have until September the 2nd to register as a voter, an eligible voter, and then the voting begins on September the 26th. So it's just as easy. Everyone's 2 clicks away from change.
And you don't need to be 18 or over. I think the age is 14, right?
14. We practice what we preach inside the party. You know, we know that there are many young people that are incredibly engaged in politics. They're ready to make an informed decision. And so anyone 14 years or older who is a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, you don't need to be a citizen, is eligible to vote as long as they are registered by September the 2nd.
Annamie Paul, thank you so very much for your time. I would continue having this conversation with you for hours and hours, but I think we'll leave it there for today. But I just really resonate with a lot of things that you said, with a lot of conversations that we're having, and I just wish you the best of luck throughout this leadership campaign, no matter where it takes you. And I really look forward to seeing your political career and its journey in the future.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on the show and for your leadership. You know, these are the new frontiers of leadership here in Canada. You're reaching a lot of people. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. And where the race is going to take me in response to what you just said is to the leadership of the Green Party. I'm in it to win it.
Good. You have my support. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wish you the most wonderful experience.
Thanks so much.
Okay. And we're off. Thank you. Oh my God, thank you. You're